Welcome, everybody, to the Last Mile Radio with Ryan Leaf. This is one of the episodes that I've been looking forward to for a long, long time. As a kid growing up in athletics, the Nike brand was absolutely the end-all, be-all. And then came along a basketball player that in the 80s, which was when I was growing up, in the 90s when he was winning championships, I remember when I got my first pair of Jordans and what a big deal it was. My mom and dad made it a surprise. They took me, and I took care of those shoes like they were nothing else. The Jordan brand became this brand, worldwide, and the gentleman who is the chairman is going to join me right now, Mr. Larry Miller.
Pleasure to be here, Ryan.
Larry, this story is fantastic. I read your book on the flight out, and I want to kind of start there. I want to look into, first off, the idea of telling your story. Everybody has a story, no matter what. But where you rose, where you got to, and the fact that maybe no one knew about this story was huge. What was the inspiration in choosing to tell this story, and who supported you through that process?
So the inspiration really was my oldest daughter. She, for years, worked on me, Dad, you have a story that could inspire and motivate people. And the way she approached it is like, your life, your story motivates me, motivates family members who know it. It'll motivate other people if you. And I husband her for many years, like, no, I'm not going to, because I was concerned that if this story got out there, it would affect everything that I've tried to build up to that point. And so I pushed back on her, but finally, she convinced me. I used to say she pushed me, and she's like, Dad, don't say that. Just say I encourage you. So she encouraged me constantly, and finally I agreed to do it. And I told her, but if I'm going to do it, we're going to do it together. And it was an incredible experience, just going through that with her, sharing stories with her that I hadn't shared with other people, sharing things that she had no clue about, in terms of she knew, what my journey had been, but she didn't know a lot of the details. And so it was really a great growing experience for the two of us as well. But she inspired me to share the story. And so we worked on it for probably over 10 years. Her and I would get together. I would share stories. She would ask questions, and she would record it. And then she'd go back and transcribe it. And so by the end, we had a document. It wasn't a book. It was a document with all these stories and information. And then we finally ended up hooking up with a ghostwriter who helped put it together in book form. But it was really her inspiration and her encouraging me that really, resulted in the book happening. When I knew that we were definitely going to do this, I had a list of people that I wanted to talk to and have them hear it from me versus hear it somewhere else. And at the top of that list were Michael Jordan and Phil Knight. And this was during the pandemic. So I reached out to both of them with a text and just said, hey, something personal I'd like to share with you. And both got back to me, and we set up the calls. And the first was with Phil Knight. And with Phil, it was like a FaceTime call, so I could see him, right? So we kind of go through the conversation. I share with him, my daughter encouraged me to do this, blah, 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 get through it. And at the end, he said, wow, when you said something personal, he said, I didn't know what to expect, but I could tell you it wasn't this, right? And so, but then he said, but I agree, your story is not only inspirational, but aspirational as well. And I agree you should share it, and anything I could do to help, let me know. And then the next day I ended up talking to MJ, and same thing, I go through the story and kind of share everything. And when I was done, and with him, it was on a phone call. So when I was done, it was like silence on the other end of the phone. And it was probably only a couple seconds, but it felt
like an eternity, probably.
And then finally he said, I agree with your daughter. You need to share this story and whatever I could do to help. And so once I had those two guys kind of like, you're doing the right thing by doing this. That gave me more confidence that I was doing the right thing by sharing the story.
The motivation, you said it took, over a span of 10 years. Okay. This was okay. Let's what we need to do is to inform our listener and go back. And I'd love for you to, I've read the book, so I feel like I know it and our audience does it. You grew up in Philly.
Yes.
And why don't you just kind of tell our audience a little bit about your youth growing up, what it was like in Philly during those times, and the process that played out?
So, growing up, like all through elementary school, I was like, smartest kid in the class. I was that
Champ.
That kid. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And but as I started to get a little older and started to get towards what we called junior high school back then, I started to feel the pull of the streets. Back then it was like you looked up to the guys in the streets, the ones who were out, hustling and just, in the gangs and stuff like that. And so eventually I ended up.
Speak to that, though, because I think with the last mile, and a lot of times while people who are justice impacted,
Mm-hmm.
they just want to be a part of something.
Exactly.
And I could tell that in the book, reading it, that you felt like you were maybe missing something and there was something bigger than you.
I agree. I've always felt like I wanted to be a part of something bigger than me. And for me at that time, the gang was what attracted me and what satisfied that need for me. So I ended up, getting involved in gang, in and out of trouble. When I was 16 years old, I shot another kid and killed him. I was charged as an adult. I pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 4.5 to 20 years. Did the 4.5, got out. And while I was doing the 4.5, I got my GED degree, took some other training stuff, but got out, back to the same neighborhood, right back into the same thing. And eventually I ended up back in jail again. The last time I was incarcerated, I had 5 armed robbery charges. And I was sentenced to 4 to 10 years. And at this point, I was at a place in Pennsylvania called Graterford Prison. And they had programs there at the time where, there were these trailers outside the jail wall, and you could live in those trailers and go to school or go to work every day. And when I heard about that program, I was like, well, if I got to do time, that's the way I'd prefer to do it.
Yeah.
And so my focus was on getting into that program, which I ended up getting into. Got my associate's degree while I was in that program, kind of going back and forth between the jail and school. Then transferred my credits from there to Temple University, moved to a halfway house in North Philly, got my bachelor's degree from Temple in accounting, of all things. As a criminal, I don't know what made me think that accounting was what I should major in. But
maybe you know where all your money was, right?
Well, that was part of it. But, one of the things that I've kind of adapted in my life is like the whole idea around balance, like trying to maintain a certain amount of balance in life, a certain amount of balance in everything. And accounting is about balancing what goes in versus what comes out. And maybe that's what attracted me to accounting. But I transferred to Temple, got my accounting degree from Temple University. And at the time, there was what was called the Big 8 accounting firms. And if you were graduating from Temple or any school, with an accounting degree, the Big 8 was your goal, was to get it hired for one of the Big 8. And so I ended up interviewing with the number of the Big 8, and there was one that I really kind of focused on, which was called Arthur Anderson.
Yeah, they were my accountants.
They were big, and went there, spent the whole day interviewing with a number of people all day long, and all day in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, should I share my story with these folks?
Right.
Because all they knew is I was a young black man about to graduate from Temple with honors, and they were interested. So all day I'm thinking, like, should I share my story? Should I share? Finally, I get to the last person, who is the hiring manager, and I decide I'm going to share my story with him. So I start to tell him my story, and as I'm talking, I could see his face changing, not in a good way. And finally, I got done, and he said, "Wow, that's an amazing story." And he reached in his pocket and pulled out an envelope, and he said, "I have an offer letter here that I was all ready to give you, but I can't give it to you now." He said, "I can't take the chance on something happening down the line. I wish you the best, but I can't hire you. And at that point, I had a couple different reactions. The first one was, the first initial reaction was, this is a waste of my time. They're never going to let me become a professional. They're never going to let me build a career because of my criminal background. So I've been wasting my time with this. But I decided that I wasn't going to give up. I was like, okay, that's what I'm feeling now, but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep pushing forward. And then the other thought was, maybe public accounting is not the right way to go for me. Maybe I should take a different route. And then the third thing was,
I can't mention this again.
I was like, I'm never going to mention this again. If it comes up, I won't deny it.
Right.
I'm not going to lie if I'm asked about it, but I'm not going to volunteer the information. And that's the way I built my career over the years.
So what year was this when you, 1970?
So it was 1982.
Okay. So 1982, everybody, the hiring practices, the background checks, like there was no digital form, right? The computers and things like that didn't exist. So it wasn't something that you had to necessarily worry about somebody finding out like it is in this day and age. And before the show, you and I were talking about how impactful your story can be to people out there because it showcases. You've reached the highest plateaus of business out there. You're talking about the Portland Trailblazers president, being a part of Jordan Brand inside Nike, now the chairman there. Like, if you weren't given that chance because of your past, you would never be able to sit here and have that. Instead, what we see is a lot of times stigma and judgment limit anybody from even getting the opportunity, but you're the example that showcases that this is what can happen if someone is given a second, third, fourth, fifth chance if they're willing to work for it.
No question about it. There's a commercial for a college, and I don't remember exact college it is, but one of the lines in the commercial says that in this world, talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. And that is, to me, a true statement. And I think there's so many talented people out there that never get an opportunity to express that talent because of their situation. And fortunately for me, I was able to, to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that were given to me. You're absolutely correct. I know today I couldn't do that because there's so much information out there. There's so much access to all this information that I would have not been able to kind of hide my past. But for years, people that I work with, people that I consider family, had no idea about my background.
Well, that was going to be my question, was how that came about. Your daughter, of course, understood. She had known you your whole life, and so the tenure process that you talked about, what did she just finally come along and try to instigate this, or was there something else out there that, like, this is fine, this is going to, with all the technology that exists, this is going to catch up to me, and I have to do something, and you were reluctant, and she was like, this is how I'm going to push you forward with this, Dad.
No question about it. And I over the years, I had nightmares. I had recurring nightmares.
Well, you opened the book with this, and I've had those feelings where there's a paranoia that when you're not truthful, when you're not vulnerable, and you're not transparent in a place of public notoriety, you always feel like there's something that can just pull that out from under my feet.
No question about it. And that was hanging over me all the time. I had migraines on a regular basis. It was actually physically affecting me, just the fact that I was concerned that it would come out. One of the things that I really am thankful for, and again, to my daughter, is that I was able to tell the story on my own terms.
Yeah.
Versus it comes out somehow and then I'm trying to defend it or whatever. This allowed me to tell it on my own terms and to put it out there, under my own circumstances. And so I'm definitely grateful for that. But since I started sharing the story, and the other thing is I always felt like if I was talking, especially to young people, I always felt like I was cheating them. Because I would talk about my career accomplishments, but I wouldn't talk about how I got there.
The adversity.
And I felt like I was cheating the audience, especially, like I said, young people. Now, I can tell the whole story. I don't have to hide anything. And the nightmares have stopped. The migraines have stopped. So it's been it's been one of the best things I have ever done. It was to make this transition. The other thing is, it's allowed me to reach back and start to help people, figure out how to help people who are in a similar situation to mine, and who also, with given opportunities, would be able to be contributors to their communities.
I would assume, watching the businesses you've been able to work for, and Michael Jordan and Phil Knight, and their philanthropic and the way they were able to give back, had to have influenced this as well.
No, absolutely. I've always, and I learned this early on. One of my first jobs, I worked for Jantzen, a swimwear company in Portland, and never forget, when I first moved out there, I had to sell my house back in Pennsylvania, and I took a loss on the house. And I was flying with some of the corporate executives for VF, who was the company that owned Jantzen at the time. And one of the executives came up and we started talking, and he said, "How's it going with the move?" I said, "Well, it's going good. I kind of lost some money on the house." And he said, "Well, how much?" And I told him, and he said, "Okay." And I saw him go up and get on the phone, Laura. He came back later on. He said, "That problem you have, you don't have it anymore. We're going to take care of that, and we're going to cover that for you." And I was like, "Wow, I appreciate that." He said, "Just think about what you can do for other people going forward. Just pay it forward." And that's always been in my mind since that time, that the more I felt like the further my career advanced, the more I could figure out ways to give back. And so that's always been a part of, and then seeing to your point, seeing how, MJ, Phil Knight, folks like that are philanthropists and, doing things for other people. That's always been something that inspired me. So yeah, now I'm like really focused on how can I help folks who have been in a similar situation to mine.
My biggest, I guess, epiphany was when people think you're important, and you take that on a little bit. I was convinced that to make my life better, everything kind of had to be about me. What other people could do for me, what I got out of it. And when I went through what I went through, I ultimately found, and over these last 10 years, it's been when I make it about someone else, my life gets better.
Absolutely.
And that may be the truest statement of all. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about, what went down, how you overcame it, and some of the things that I think you can teach people about that experience right here on the Last Mile Radio with Ryan Leaf. Welcome back, everybody, to the Last Mile Radio with Ryan Leaf. We're here with Larry Miller, chairman of the Jordan brand, and his story is fascinating. If you've been listening, you heard how it all started, kind of where it went to, and what he got to. I want to dive a little bit into the childhood. I mean, because you talked about in the book really how successful you were. You were smartest kid in the room, kind of, even when you were in and Justice Impacted, you were the valedictorian of your class and everything like that. The one thing I had a question about was, and maybe because the form wasn't long enough to really dig in deep, and like how quickly it felt like from being in this really great spot to jumping into and deciding and choosing this other way of life. Mm. Was that you just weren't able to kind of maybe talk about it as much, or was it kind of that kind of quick action in the streets there where like I was doing this, everything was going the right way, and then all of a sudden everything was going in the opposite direction?
No, I think it was kind of a gradual change for me because I even when I was in the streets doing all the crazy stuff, I had this voice that was always there telling me, you shouldn't be doing this. So that was always a part of it. But no, it was more of a gradual, and eventually my goal became, instead of trying to please teachers and parents, it became trying to impress people in the street.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of a gradual shift. But at a certain point, I just was 100% committed to the street and committed to the gang. And But it was a gradual over time kind of transition for me. And I in the neighborhood at the time, the cool guys were the guys in the gang. The cool guys were the guys who were in the street, and that's what appealed to me at that point. And once I've always been whatever I kind of get into, I kind of get into it. And so once I decided that that's where I was going to go, I was 100% into the whole gang. And you hit on a point earlier, Ryan, that I think is valid. It's like I've always had this desire to be a part of something bigger than me.
Yep. And that happens for so many people that are gang initiated, and they go to prison because of those things, and then they come to realize that that wasn't what the bigger than me thing was, but they're so pulled to it because they just want to feel seen.
Exactly.
Or feel heard.
And a part of something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so yeah, it was kind of a gradual, but once I got into it, I was wholeheartedly into it.
I can feel that and understand that. Like, when I put all my effort into something, whether it be something great
or
something bad, it's full force and it's full in. Like,
yes.
It's immersed like nobody's business.
Yeah.
And I think that is a sign of someone who has a very capability of being so successful.
Exactly. And the issue is, how do you focus that in the right direction? How do you, utilize that drive and that desire to be the best at what you do? How do you, channel that in a positive way? And I think that's something that I've was able to make the transition to be able to channel that desire in a positive way.
Through the process, and one of the biggest steps for me, I think, in the freedom that I have was the accountability side of stuff. And telling your story is one thing. Reconciling and understanding what you have done and how you've had a hand in or harmed other people. Where was it along this journey that you were able to look in the mirror, take accountability for what you've done, and what kind of amends have you made for a life you took when you were 16 years old?
So I once I started to change my perspective and started to really think about, how I wanted to live my life different from what I did, that was really something that just hung over me. The fact that I took someone's life for no reason whatsoever. It was just random and it was senseless. And, if I could go back and undo it, I absolutely would. But I can't. So what I can do now is try to, make up for it, try to do things positive on the positive side. But one of the things I really am happy about is that I got an opportunity to meet with the family of the young man that I shot, and that was really something that that moved me probably more than any other outcome from writing the book and sharing my story. Was the opportunity to sit down with the family and express my sorrow and remorse for what I had done. What was their
initial reaction?
So it was his sister, his son, and his daughter. And after I expressed my remorse and sorrow, they each spoke and talked about how what happened affected them. But at the end of each one of them speaking, they said, "But I forgive you." And that meant more to me.
How did that feel?
That meant more to me than any. And at the end, we hugged and there were tears. And it was an emotional, really emotional situation. But to hear them say, "But I forgive you," that meant everything to me, because, over the years, I've worked on forgiving myself. I've absolutely asked God for forgiveness, and to have the ability for the family to say, "We forgive you," that really meant the world to me.
Because that's not always the case, especially for individuals who are making amends, and I've had to do a lot of that. And when you walk into those things, essentially a lot of the time, the amends is personal. It's for you.
Absolutely.
To try to remove this weight. But the people that are having the amends made to them, they may not be in the place to be willing to forgive or care or want. And so that had to have been incredibly freeing for someone who would carry that for so long.
It absolutely was, and his family is they're amazing people, and for them to be willing to say, I forgive you, that was just again, to me, it was a testament to the kind of people that they are, that they were willing to do that, and they were willing to say, I forgive you, and again, that is the best thing that's come out of this whole process for me.
I was listening to Ricky Pearsall, the young wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers, who was shot in a robbery attempt this summer, and right before his rookie season, where he was going to make an impact. And they asked him the question last night around, would he be willing to talk to the person that shot him, and around the judgment of it all. And he said something very profound to me. And this is a white man, but he's played in a profession and in a sport, probably 75 to 80% African American. And he said, I don't know how this man was raised or where he came from for me to, as a man, judge him. And I would suspect that family, knowing the circumstances in which you talked about, and some people have a hard time wrapping their head around it because they can't empathize to where you grew up in.
Right.
The environment, the systematic racism that was pointed to really bringing a population down.
Right.
To maybe having more understanding in that moment when something tragic happened to their family.
Yeah, no, and I'm hoping that by sharing my story, it's going to open more people up to be more open to understanding the fact that people shouldn't necessarily be judged by the worst thing that they've ever done.
They shouldn't.
And as people are looking and willing and trying to change their life, I think the opportunity to do that should be there for people. And I just feel truly blessed that I've been able to take advantage of the opportunity to change my life. And like I said, now have the opportunity to share my story and maybe help impact somebody else's life in a positive way.
You talked about, and as I talked about, when you have your boss's approval around something like this, what anybody else has to say, really, it's none of your business. But, it's something that we've carried for so long. You carried for so long. It's still going to linger there. Was there any residual things that cropped up or became something that bothered you during this span when you talked about what went down, knowing that there was going to be no consequence to it because you've worked hard and you had the backing of the people but other things that may have had something and some residual effect that lingered with this because of it?
Well, one positive thing that I found out. So when I was going to work for the Trailblazers, when I was going to take on the role of the president at the Trailblazers, Paul Allen, who was the owner there, also owned the Seahawks, as you're aware. And so there was a guy named Todd Lewicki. I don't know if you know Todd.
I do.
Todd's a great guy. But anyway, Todd was the person that was the hiring manager for this role. And Todd and I had kind of really clicked, and he was 100% convinced that I was the right person for the job. He was totally zoned in on that. So because Paul owned the Seahawks, they actually had the NFL do the background check, NFL security. Well, and I didn't know this at all. Todd reached out to me after the book came out and said, "Hey, when you're next time you're in Seattle, let's go to breakfast. I want to share something with you." So him and I go to breakfast, and he starts to tell me this story that they had the NFL security do the background check.
So he knew it when he hired you.
These guys actually, the NFL guys, went down to Philly, dug up some old records, and they found stuff. So they came back to Todd and said, "Hey, we found some stuff on this guy, and we're pretty sure this is him." And Todd now he was torn because he really wanted to hire me, and he was concerned that if he shared the story with Paul, that Paul would not be willing to do it. So he said he called David Stern, and he asked Stern, do I have to share this information with Paul? And Stern said, yeah, you do. If you found this out, this, you can't hire this person without sharing it with the owner. So Todd said he's driving from Portland to Seattle, and he calls Paul and says, "Hey, got something I need to share with you, blah, blah, blah." So he said as he kind of starts sharing this with Paul, and he felt like Paul was kind of distracted as he's talking to him, but, Paul always kind of sounded like that because he had a thousand things going on in his head. Yeah. But then he said, he said, finally he gets through and he shares it. And he said, finally, Paul said, well, I got one question for you. He said, what's that? He said, how long ago was this? I said, I don't know, 20, 30. He said, don't worry about it then. So they hired me anyway, even though they knew the background story, and never said a word to me about it.
So you didn't know any of this?
I had no clue that they knew. And I'm worried, I'm nervous that they might find, Paul knew, David Stern knew, Todd knew, and I don't know if it went any further than that, but they decided to hire me anyway. But to me, that was a testament to the fact that they were looking at who I am today, not who I was 20 years ago. They were looking at what I could bring to the table for the Trailblazers today and not judging me based on the past. And they gave me the job.
What do you think if in terms of communication, would you have rather them told you this though? So for your future well-being?
That's a good question. I probably would have, because then at least I would have not been nervous and worried. But then on the other hand, if I did know, I don't know how that would have affected me. If I knew they knew, I don't know how that would affect. Because, I just operated as if no one knew, and I could just be, this executive, and to know that they knew, that might have changed my perspective a little bit. But
and then you go into this job, and because of Paul Allen, being pulled at so many different directions, you ended up at owners meetings. So and as essentially an owner in that room speaking for the Portland Trailblazers.
So for 5 years, I was at pretty much every owners meeting. If other owners had issues, a lot of times they would reach out to me. If the league had issues, actually, Stern actually put me on the labor committee that negotiated the contract between the players and the owners. And the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm like, how the hell did I get to this? You know what I mean? But
he knew your story.
Stern knew. It's funny. I always felt like he treated me a little special, but in a good way, right? And one of my regrets is that I didn't get a chance to have this conversation with Paul and David Stern. They both passed before the story came out, right, before I shared it. And, that's one of the things I regret that I didn't.
But does it take heart, though, that knowing that they knew that and that they still believed in you that way?
That is like one of the best things that I can think
that
about.
Gave me goosebumps, man. That's these last 10 years have been hard sometimes for me. And when I did a full podcast on the men and women that have given me the support and the second chances. Some of them, that's powerful stuff.
That it really is. I mean, again, to me, they were able to look past my past and say, this is who he is today, and we want him.
This is who we know,
and we want him to be a part of our organization. And that, like I said, and the fact that they never said anything to me about it was like, now I think back sometimes to some of the interactions and it's like, wow, they knew all the time, So, but again, I commend them. I wish I had been able to thank both Paul and David, and I was able to thank Todd because Todd was really the one that pushed for me. And
he ended up being the second in command at the NFL for a while.
He did. Now he's running the Kraken up in Seattle.
Yep.
But yeah, Todd's a good guy. He's a really good guy.
I have him in my phone. Yeah, he was one that I over the last 10 years have stayed in contact with, and he's been very helpful and stuff. I don't know if an hour is long enough here, but we're gonna take a quick break and get back to Larry Miller right here on the Last Mile Radio with Ryan Leaf. Welcome back, everybody, to Last Mile Radio with Ryan Leaf. We're here with Larry Miller, chairman of the Jordan brand, and this story of his is absolutely fascinating. I want to get into some of the stuff you're becoming a part of and looking to change in, but the interesting part of what we just talked about was these two men who were at the highest level of their professions at the time were willing to look past anything that your past had to bring, but the man now. And you had always been looking for something to be a part of, something bigger than you. And this was it, and it was happening while you really didn't even know it, and you found it. This also stemmed when you were looking for something when you got out after your first justice-impacted moment when you were 16. You became a part of the Nation of Islam.
I did.
And that was fascinating to read because at a time, again, you're looking for something bigger than yourself, and for a young black man at that age in Philly, this was a next step to that.
Absolutely, it was, and I to your point, I was struggling. I was trying to figure out, the world. I was trying to figure out life, and just as a young black man in Philly, what I saw going on around me was like, there's something wrong here. There's something out of whack here. And at the time, the Nation of Islam seemed to answer that for me, and so I was attracted to that, and I became a member of the Nation of Islam, and it was actually a good thing for me. I stopped using drugs, I stopped smoking, I stopped doing all those things as a part of being in the Nation of Islam. And in hindsight, some of the teachings were
like any religion,
yeah. But one of the things that happened going forward was once the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who passed on, his son then said, "Hey, a lot of that my dad was teaching is not what you should be doing, and here's where you should be going." And so that definitely was helpful for me. But it was, again, that desire to belong to something greater than me.
And you found out you could be a pretty darn good salesman.
I did. Sold fish, sold newspapers, sold pies. I door to door. I was pretty good at selling.
If I can sell that, I can sell some sneakers, right? That Michael Jordan's a part of.
Exactly. That was much easier than door to door selling fish.
Yeah. Jumpman, everything. Talk to us a little bit about what the Jump initiative is.
So basically, we working with the Just Trust, which was started by the Zuckerberg family.
Yeah.
We're now, so for years their focus was around changing laws, around doing things that would change the system, and now they've decided to add a reentry piece to that, and that's where the Jump Initiative comes into play. We're actually going to be launching, doing a launch event, All-Star Weekend in San Francisco, to launch the Jump Initiative and to talk about what our goals are, what it is we're looking to do. But it's really about not just reentry, but about providing opportunities for people to really excel and for people to really build a sustainable life, to be able to make money that sustains a lifestyle, and to come home and be able to really build a successful existence and to become contributors to their communities versus people who take from the community. And so we're launching that initiative, like I said, in a few weeks in San Francisco. I've also been involved with an organization called Concordance, which is out of St. Louis. It was started by Dave Stewart, who is the black billionaire in the country. And basically in St. Louis, they start working, going inside the prisons, working with people for 3 to 6 months before they get out, and then they have a facility that they can come to, and for counseling, for drug counseling, for mental health counseling, and then also for job preparation and help people to prepare for a job. And they actually help place people at jobs. They have connections with different companies, different organizations where they actually place people in jobs. So I've been kind of working with those two organizations to really help share the story about the fact that, people not only deserve a second chance, but that people, if given that chance, to your point, second, third, fourth, fifth, given that chance, will be successful at whatever it is they do. I tell people this all the time, but some of the smartest, most creative people I've ever met are people I met while I was incarcerated. And the difference is these are folks who, based on their environment, based on their situation, based on where they grew up, where they never get an opportunity to express that talent. And like I said earlier, talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is provide opportunities for people to realize that talent.
Yeah, it's not lost on me that the opportunities that I've been afforded, if I wasn't living the life I was supposed to and doing the right thing, those opportunities would have just fallen by the wayside.
Absolutely.
And so it's almost imperative that I don't take it for granted and make the most of every single one of them, because I'm very, very lucky.
Absolutely.
When you walked out, for me, there was, and this is why I love both of the initiatives you're working with. It is about what happens next, because it's supposed to be rehabilitating.
Yeah.
Reading the book, it felt like you felt hope when you walked out. Like the programs that you were available to you in there, you had some hope when you walked out.
I did. I mean, I think to me, there are a lot of people incarcerated that would change their life if they knew how. They don't know. It's like, what do I do? How do I change? And once I realized that education was what could potentially change my life, that's what gave me hope. And so, again, I started taking classes inside the jail. And then once I got into the program where I was going to school every day, I really started to believe that I could change my life. And I think that's a big part of it. To me, it starts inside. You have to want to change. You have to want to do something different. But then you have to figure out, how do I do that? What are the things that are available to me to help me to make that change? And right now, they're not, like the program I was involved in doesn't exist anymore. So if I was coming out today, I couldn't do what I've been able to do, because I wouldn't have had that opportunity to get that education that I was able to get. And I know without a doubt, and education is what made the difference for me. And I think that would make the difference for a lot of folks. And to me, to your point, it's not about rehabilitation anymore in most places. But there's something like I was in San Quentin not too long ago. They had a film festival.
I'm going Friday.
They had a film festival there. And so there are some places like that where there's some progressive things going on. There are things that are helping and preparing people for when they get out, training people in skills that they can utilize when they get out. To me, that's what we should be. A friend of mine once talked about his uncle who had been incarcerated, and he never was the same when he came out. But he said to me, the goal should be people come out better people than they were when they went in.
The places have become such the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's never going to happen. That people won't be better people unless they have the opportunity to learn and do some things that are going to help them to be better people.
And you have the right people in the positions of power in these institutions. We had my warden on the show recently, because I didn't understand the power that he had in my life at the time, and he's become one of the biggest supports of my last 10 years. And so that's exactly what the Last Mile does. Right. And it speaks to preparing someone who did a bad thing and is not a bad person for what's next. And so with that, with the Jump Initiative, with what you're doing, with the All-Star Game, if there's anything I can do for you in this initiative in the NBA to show those individuals that they have something when they get out, because I just think a lot of people just assume I walked out and I was this rich, famous former football player. That was none of that.
Right.
You're stripped away of everything.
Absolutely.
And you know this better than anybody. You have to get back to a place where that ultimately can be a benefit to you. But until that time, the hole is about 400 feet down, and you have to climb your way out of it.
Exactly. No, so I'm absolutely going to take you up on your offer to help, because we definitely will reach out and but you're absolutely right. I think people don't realize the challenges you have when you come out. I mean, I'm never going to be one that says if someone commits a crime, they shouldn't pay for it. You should pay.
There's consequences to any choice.
Exactly. And if you commit a crime, you do something to break the law, you should pay for it. But that doesn't mean your humanity should be taken away. That doesn't mean that you never get an opportunity to go on with your life at a certain point.
The punishment is the loss of freedom.
Exactly. But it goes way beyond that now. It's not just the loss of freedom, it's the loss of everything, basically.
Dignity, humanity,
exactly.
Everything you talked about.
Exactly.
It's a powerful story. I told you what we could do and what we'd like to do. Is there how are more athletes and teams, especially in the NBA, getting involved?
Well, that's one of the things that we're looking to do with the Jump Initiative, is to really look at how can we get athletes, entertainment, tap into that world of people who have incredible influence, who can really help to change how things are done, and who, in a lot of cases, want to support. I mean, there are very few people in this country, to me, who have not somehow been impacted by the criminal justice system, either directly or indirectly, or a friend, a family member, or somebody. And to me, for folks to say, okay, how can we make sure that these people serve their time, they pay their debt to society, but then they come out and they're able to make a contribution there, and they're not. The reality is, the last numbers I saw were 70+% of people who get out are back in jail within 3 to 5 years. They're back in the system. And, if we can reduce that rate, if let's say we could reduce recidivism rate by half, that's also going to reduce the crime rate, because the majority of crime is committed by people who've already been in the system at some point, because they go right back into the same situation and the same thing, the same result happens. But to me, if we can reduce the recidivism rate, that to me is going to impact the crime rate in this country. And I think the more we can focus on how do we stop people from going back to jail once they've committed their crimes, I think that's going to be a positive for our country.
And then the probation parole problem is a big part of that. And there's a lot of people trying to make a change and do things in that direction too. The idea that I love that you look at it that way, because these NBA organizations have such an opportunity. Steve Simon and the Indiana Pacers in particular have become a big supporter of the last mile. Yes. And they hired somebody about a year ago that was a graduate. And I had a chance to meet her just a few months ago. And to see someone with the hope and the flourish of what life can be because of someone who gave them an opportunity. I love that, and the fact that you guys are going to reel it out at the All-Star game, I think is going to go a long way to giving people that kind of hope.
I was at an event, this was maybe a year or so ago, and there were justice impacted people were on the panel, and they also were there with the folks that they were working for at the time. So these are people that had transitioned, they're doing well, they're working in professional jobs. And so there was a woman there that they asked her about, how do you feel about this opportunity that you got? And she said, to me, this is not an opportunity, it's a privilege. And if you got people thinking like that about their job, thinking about like that about their, about their profession, those are people that are going to go the extra mile for you, because they see this as something that they're thrilled to be able to have the opportunity to do, versus I got to get up every day and go to work. They get up every day. Like,
you have that perspective.
For years, I was like, you know what? I could be standing in front of a judge right now. I could be locked up right now. So all of this is great to be able to be a part of what I've, I know mine goes a little further than a lot of people in terms of the things that I've been able to do and the things that I've been able to be a part of. But, it's just amazing to me that, people are given an opportunity. And again, I truly believe that more people would take advantage of opportunities if they were there, if they were given to them.
And I think that understanding is so important, your point of view, for someone to be in the position that you are in, to have that perspective of gratitude. Like, you're going to appreciate your job and work harder than someone who doesn't have that perspective.
No. Again, for me, like I said, I always looked at it as a privilege every day. Like, wow, I'm privileged to be able to do what I do, and to, be able to have the kind of work that I have and be involved in the things that I'm involved in. It's a privilege for me.
I wake up every morning and I choose to be happy.
Exactly.
And you have that choice. People have that choice, and people just don't choose to. And for many different reasons. The reason I do is it could be worse. And you and I know what worse is.
We know that from experience, right?
And so that leads me to how we finish this. Having gone through the things that we went through, understanding that you had to do what you had to do in terms of not telling anybody to make sure you were employed and got to do it. Do you have any regrets about that? Was there a moment where you were in a situation, and clearly in some very difficult situations in business, where you felt like you would have shared that and been more trustworthy to people who've become really important in your lives?
So, I do. Sometimes I have that thought because, for years I hid that, and for years, avoided everything that could maybe even lead to the conversation about it. And to be able to now say, you know what, this is who I am. These are the things that I've done in my life. These are this is the journey I've been on. And when, as far as regrets are concerned, I guess I would say there are things that I would absolutely do different, or things that I would not do if I had the opportunity to go back, which we don't. So to me now it's about, okay, moving forward, how can I be the best person that I can be? How can I contribute and help other people? It's about moving forward. But again, I don't say I have regrets, because I believe that all the things that I've been through have led me to be where I am today, and to be the person that I am today. And so regrets, I don't necessarily would say regrets, but absolutely there are things that I would do different. There were things that if I could go back and change them or undo them, I would. But I believe that everything that I've done on this journey has really led me to be where I am today, and has provided me the opportunity to try to help other people.
Well, I feel like you do that, and I think for someone who's in a similar position as yourself, to know that these things are possible, for me, I think this has been very cathartic.
So, and I want to commend you for sharing your story, for putting yourself out there, and for taking, just doing this is spreading information that can help people. It's, getting information out there that can change people's perspective. And so I commend you, and I thank you for what you're doing, and the fact that you've shared your story, and that you're open with, your journey. I think that's a big deal, and I appreciate it, and thank you.
Larry Miller, everybody, chairman of the board of the Jordan brand, and much, much more. All right. I don't have much time here, but I do want to say that what Larry did and his choice, it may have come to fruition, it may have come out at some point, but the choice on his part to tell his story, because the impact I think it's going to make on not only young black men who have made mistakes in their lives, to understand that they can own it, move on from it, and have the life of their dreams, is the reason why he is here today. And I'm so grateful for him and for his time with The Last Mile. You've been listening to The Last Mile Radio on Sirius XM. I'm Ryan Leaf. We'll see you next time.